A striking woman leans against the cabin top of her sailing boat, smiling as you approach. Her green raincoat glistens with droplets. A silk scarf is tied around her throat.
Good evening, officers. I'm Joyce. Joyce L. Messier. I represent the board of Wild Pines, the owners of the harbour. You gentlemen must be from the RCM. I'm glad to see you here. I was dispatched to handle a strike, not a lynching. Anything I can do to assist the RCM in this matter, I will, gladly.
That is good to hear, madame. My colleague will take the lead on this interview. I should let you know that he is recovering from an unusual medical episode. Very unusual. But I can assure you of his ultimate competency.
How interesting. I wish you a swift recovery. In the meanwhile, you have my full cooperation, and the full cooperation of the Wild Pines Group. What we do. I'm afraid I don't speak for Wild Pines as a whole. It's a giant undertaking.
There was a touch of discomfort there. She wants to merely represent.
The Pines' core competency is logistics. Container shipping, freight, that sort of thing. See those airships there, blinking? Those are the shipping side of things, and that is the terminal. Another subdivision deals with energy, oil and gas exploration, offshore platforms.
The Wild Pines Group is one of the original Revacholian Indo-tribes. Companies awarded royal monopolies by the king, the suzerain himself, centuries ago. The king is long gone, but several of the Indo-tribes remain. Jean-Baptiste, Elysium, an unknown entity known as Brightest Star.
Why, thank you. I'm not at liberty to discuss the company balance sheet, but I can tell you that last year, the company booked more than 20 billion real in revenue. $20 billion is a large number, but the conglomerate employs 72,000 people. They all need to be paid. Then there are capital improvements, interest payments. A conglomerate the size of the Wild Pines is like a shark. If it stops moving, it will die. Then what becomes of those 72,000 families? It's a tremendous responsibility. They started as an exploration and cargo fleet conducting trade between the Samaran and Insulindian Isolas 250 years ago, when pine ships explored the South Seminese and charted Lomantang on behalf of the suzerain. Centuries of care, deliberation, and madness have gone into this endeavor. Vessels pass through the Great Unrest to re-emerge with apricots in tow. The logic of the system is totalizing. It's taken everything from its employees to build it. You know more than you let on. Certainly it helped, but most of the original Indo tribes have failed, or been absorbed. To survive, Wild Pines had to grow and adapt. No suzerain did that. You mean aside from being the terminal's legal owners, who are responsible for moving 8% of the world's cargo? There are no minor cogs in the system. Each terminal must be accounted for, lest the entire system break. Every hiccup in such a system means thousands lose their jobs, the world over. I'm here to assure that doesn't happen.
With your help, hopefully, says her warm tone.
Everything. Right up to, but not including, trade secrets. First, you'd have to repeal the Emergencies Act of Trade in Aliments. That gives me the right to silence. It's quite the octopus. Why? By throwing off half a century of foreign domination under the Coalition. Unfortunately for you, the Coalition also...
You'd be shooting yourself in the foot. Enough.
But I am derailing us. You wanted to know about the strike. I believe the official title is Senior Labor Negotiator. In practice, I'm a grocery clerk. I relay the union's demands to Wild...
And how are the talks going?
They're not. That's the problem. The union stopped all negotiations a week ago, after that awful lynching took place. Now they won't even let me into the harbour. There's a 2-meter-20 racist behemoth blocking the gates. Yes, Jean-Luc Measurehead. Yes, Jean-Luc Measurehead. Let's say I was not making the kind of progress I'd hoped for when I first arrived.
And when did you first arrive?
I arrived 3 weeks ago. Yes, in the middle of February. The bay was still partially frozen then. I prefer to do these things on site, like the RCM.
But the strike began in December.
I wasn't the original negotiator here. I took over after Mr. Gaumont hit a wall with Mr. Clare, the union boss. Mr. Clare refused to speak with Gaumont despite concessions he'd granted the union in prior negotiations.
This isn't the first time the union has gone on strike.
Heavens, no. There have been 2 prior strikes. Both times the union won significant concessions, including overtime pay and a medical plan. This time their demands are more, I guess you could say, aggressive.
Ludicrous even. It's meant.
Mr. Clare told him to... how did he put it? Fuck off, midget. Gaumont is short of stature, you see. Keep in mind, this is a negotiator Mr. Clare has worked with before, and who was more than fair with him and the union. There are leaflets everywhere, and banners. What did they say again? Oh yes, every worker, a member of the board.
Most of the workers probably don't know what that means.
In its defense, another said, demand democracy. Pretty tame stuff compared to every worker, a member of the board. It's quite simple, you see. Every time the Wild Pines group makes a decision, about what? About anything really, it needs the signature of each of the 2,200 workers in its Martinez terminal. Just so you understand, this is but one of 22 terminals owned by Wild Pines. Essentially, not only are they kings of the company, they are also kings of the 72,000 employees of Wild Pines Group. They're having a blast. But how can they afford it? After 4 months, my assumption was they would prefer a more practical solution. I'm not sure. Naturally, I assume that was just their opening position. A hard-nosed tactic with a side of mockery. But there's been no follow-up, just the same nonsensical slogan repeated over and over again. And now, people are getting lynched, I hear. Behind the whirling in rags. A disastrous situation if there ever was one.
Excuse me, from whom did you hear about this lynching?
I first heard it from the boyer at the gates. The one whose very name advertises his aversion to work. I think he said it was, "Call me mañana."
This checks out.
The scabs? You mean the huddled masses of Jamrock, come to plead for work where the union refuses? If they were organized by Wild Pines or its affiliates, then it would be a company secret. I could not...
It's implied. She's open to discussing this matter with you at a later occasion.
Everard Clare is a man of the utmost integrity. If you can say one thing about him, it's that he always puts the interests of the workers first. Of course not. Everard is fantastically corrupt. I imagine he has a thick, viscous goo where you and I have blood. He is the most corrupt individual I have ever seen, and I deal with men like him for a living. If there is anyone more venal, more irredeemably nepotistic, then it's his twin brother, Edgar. Yes, Edgar looks exactly like his brother, except for that lazy eye. He also talks exactly like Everard does, and when one's term, it's how they circumvent the term limits, you see, with a funny little switcheroo. While in office, they've embezzled God knows how much of their workers' dues. The Débardeurs Union was once a perfectly normal institution. 20 years ago, anyway. It must not have been easy to establish under the Emergency Act. But they did it. Organised labour at its best, as they say. Then something happened in the local chapter elections. The brothers Clare came and transformed it into a... how do you say?
A mob. The Débardeurs are a crime syndicate. Sad as it may be, I suspect we'll be forced to cooperate with them.
Refreshingly honest, officer. The company has tried appeasing in the past, but I'm afraid our concessions have only emboldened Everard and his brother. And your opinion, detective? If I may ask. I'm a curious and talkative person, you see. Would you say the Débardeurs Union is... Indeed, and a hungry one. Sadly, Wild Pines have cooperated with what amounts to a crime syndicate for 2 decades. However much you feed the leech always hungers. I'm glad you asked. There was a woman, the previous forewoman of the Union. She disappeared.
Disappeared?
Yes. On the last day of the local chapter elections, her daughter phoned in and said she wasn't running anymore. Or coming to work. Ever. And downright haunting, if you ask me. The Wild Pines suspected foul play. The point of the presentation is, these kinds of things happen around the Clares. Watch out when you're dealing with him.
Thank you for your concern, ma'am. We'll be just fine.
Of course. How else can I help? Why, yes I am. The boat? No. It is called Cor de Leyte 19 because that's the type of sloop it is. It's a pleasure craft. A 19-pacer. It also happens to be rated for Category 1 racing. It's a pleasure craft. A 19... My sloop? I like it a lot. It's the eel's hips, baby.
I'm enjoying this part of the interview. It has so...
I really do, the lieutenant thinks. Is she thrown off yet? He's looking at the woman, assessing her.
Of course there are. We're on an archipelago. How else are you supposed to get around? Yes, we are. We are on Le Caille.
Technically, the neighboring Ozone and Fas Alamer island groups are archipelagos, while La Caille, by contrast, is a single fertile landmass, the 4th largest island in the world. It is not an archipelago.
Okay, if you want to get technical. The point is, we're all on islands here, and sail is still the most expedient way to get from one island to another. Especially when you're in a hurry to resolve a strike. I haven't seen anyone else drive a suit.
Actually, that motor carriage has been specially issued to serve as a patrol, and it's for crossing long distances in a greater...
Neither is this. A toy, I mean. It's a machine for crossing long distances.
You need to make this lady admit she's only riding around on this boat because she's rich. Why what? Stop thinking. Take her down. Charge. You've got the guns and the ammo.
Oh my, the E word. You mean to say that it's a symbol of conspicuous consumption? That I'm a member of the ruling class?
Detective, may I remind you that Mrs. Messier is a professional negotiator?
Then what does that say? Does it say, docking reserved for resident 33A? This old proletarian haunt here? As I said, plenty of people drive boats, of all social strata.
She takes a sip.
Okay. Of course.
Nothing happens for quite a while. It doesn't.
My, it's as if there's a tiny spinner on the side of his head.
Except he isn't.
Of course. Lieutenant, I truly don't understand what is happening.
I told you his methods are unconventional.
It was quite a while ago, but I think... Yes, we were discussing my fast, large, ineluctably middle officer. I assure you, I'm a highly...
The crowns of her teeth are porcelain, white as the boat. Her nonchalance might be related to something called the Wayfarer Act. A law that says she doesn't need a license. Sly fox.
Oh my, the E word.
Detective, may I...
Then what does that 33A? This... Yes. Anyway. Oh my.
Detective.
Then what does 33... Yes. Anyway. Good. Quite a few things, I'm afraid. The information I'm to share with you includes sensitive trade secrets. For the sake of my employer, I have to ask for your names and badge numbers.
Of course, ma'am. We should have introduced ourselves. And this is my colleague from Precinct 41. I'm afraid he doesn't have his...
How curious. Why is that, Detective? I see. So, are you saying you lost your badge during the course of this episode? I can't hear you, darling. Speak up, please. Oh dear. I suppose this does explain...
She must have been suspecting something for...
As I said, ma'am, his technique may be very unconventional, but he is.
Of course, I sympathize. But I'm afraid I simply can't share anything more until I've seen that badge.
Hang on. She's a professional negotiator. She should be open to some sort of mutually beneficial arrangement. Feelings will guide the way.
I assure you, it is no small matter for me either. We all share the responsibility for disarming this situation. I hope you have a badge for me as soon as possible.
She's silent. The wind flaps the sail above her.
Officer. You know, I don't mean to sound cold, but if you want something...
You're doing it. Despite your own best efforts, you're still getting in.
I'll be frank with you. If I'm going to break protocol, I need to be able to justify it to my superiors. The Union is conducting drug trade out of the harbor. It's an open secret in Martinez. Surely it must not come as a complete... Or you can find your...
Detective, a word in private before we continue.
Hey. Psst. Yes, you. Word on the street is you're ready to start building communism again. You keep saying things like, down with the bourgeoisie, eat the rich, sodomize the landowners, impale all people who have more than 25 real in their pockets. Literally murder all human beings, regardless of the... Okay, not in so many words, but don't deny it. You're about to rip off that mask of everyone can see that. So tell me, do you have any questions before we fire up the big communist failure? It's about failure. Yes, abject failure. Total, irreversible defeat on all fronts. Absolutely vanquished. You alone. Against every living thing, against every human alive. 800 trillion real in the hands of an impossibly well-organized ruling class. Towering city blocks of bankmen who have the ears of Prime Minister. You against the atom, the charm and the spin, where the whole world failed. Matter failed to bend to human will. Human will failed to get out of bed and tie its laces. Now get to work, comrade. Very well. I guess no one will build communism then. Tell the no objections. It's mathematically impossible to achieve a classless society. Anyone? Anyone else? There's no one? There's no one. Okay then, lie down and let the water... It's clear you like the hard stuff, Brota. Evening falls. The time has come to take the vows are blood and flesh. Lower intestine? The term is metabolic and fascism, Brota. Many things, but it's mostly about trusting your gut. Who does your gut tell you is the source of Revachol's problems? Yes, them, but also women. Women, men of war. You don't like them. They're insane. Their idiocy needs to be scrubbed off this world with rubbing alcohol. Women need to go back to the fucking kitchen. That's what fascism boils down to. The rest is also important. But the main thing is that women need to know their place. Stomach truth. You're having a stomach truth because you've said the hard things that others won't say. The good things, you've said them many times. Okay, yes, let's call it that. That sounds much better. Traditionalism. You like that. You're going to keep your views, right? Keep your views, Brota. There's a slow, painful growl somewhere in your It is one of betrayal and disappointment.
This is not going quite as I hoped it would, Detective. Honestly, I was expecting you to use your unorthodox technique to keep her off balance and, not volunteer us to be her henchman. This woman is running circles around us. She might have known about your misplaced badge all along, or she's simply an adept improviser. Either way, we've played straight into her hands. No, if there is reasonable suspicion, we must investigate. Otherwise, she could claim we... What I propose is, we ask her, then we investigate, briefly. But do not share the outcome of this investigation with her. We tell her it's done and demand for her information on the lynching.
You're back. Good. What can I help you with? It's quite straightforward. Someone is using Terminal B to smuggle raw ingredients from the Samar and Isola into Revachol with the Union's...
Ingredients for what?
Meth and dextroamphetamine, GBL and various synthetic psychedelics. Honestly, it might be quicker to say what you can't make from the stuff. Yes. After they clear the terminal, we lose track. The actual production is taking place at
Wildpine seems to be well apprised of the local drug trade, ma'am. Do you mean to say the...
We're in logistics. It's our business to know. And no. As far as the company knows, the Union does not produce it. They transport the ingredients for a cut. Yes, but you won't get anything out of Evrat and the Dock Workers Union. Still, every chain has its weak link.
The handoff. The motor lorries at the roundabout.
Precisely. Someone needs to move the ingredients from the harbour into the city. Once they reach Jamrock, they're distributed to...
How convenient that they're stranded like beached whale.
Perhaps you've noticed that a number of lorries are tangled in a traffic jam at the roundabout just now. Interview the driver. I'll be explicit. If you find this driver, I will share company secrets with you. We did. on more than one occasion. Apparently, there's some sort of
We know the company has launched its own probe into the Union's alleged involvement. We also know it's come up empty.
Well, here's your chance, officers. No. We asked East Motor Track to raise the drawbridge. The road company is a partner of one of our subsidiaries. This is a limited time opportunity. Once the complaint has been processed by the Trade Committee, they'll have no choice but to lower the drawbridge. And the operation will... Thousands of litres of raw ingredients will pour onto the streets of Revachol. Not the east across...
Well, at least this solves one mystery.
What is that, Lieutenant?
Why I had to call East Motor Track and beg them to open a drawbridge for me. I'd wondered since I first drove in, on my motor carriage.
I am sorry for the inconvenience, Lieutenant Kisaragi, but we need them trapped here. This is a unique opportunity. I'm sure... How do you think they're financing this strike? There are thousands of unpaid dock workers going strong for the...
There was a shakedown of local businesses preceding the strike. Many were squeezed to bankruptcy.
With all due respect to these desert cacti, the contents of a few cash registers cannot provide for 2,000 men. The local businesses can... Precisely. Smuggled out of that very gate at night, most likely, then loaded onto lorries and driven to Jamrock. You simply need to find one driver who will open up to you. Yes? Excellent. According to my reports, there are at least 3 lorry drivers lingering near the... It may come to nothing, or it may just blow the case wide open. I can keep the drawbridge up for a few more days at least. In the meantime, let me know if there's any other way I may be of assistance. This... reality?
Yes, reality and experimental side case.
How truly curious. A sort of philosopher-detective.
Are they now?
A deep synthesis. I'll assist you however I can then. Go ahead. Ask.
All right, we're in. I know these all look good, but begin with the first, okay?
We're in Martinez, baby. Martinez is a district of Revachol. A very small district tucked away near the industrial harbour. North of the 881 and Jam. You would be excused for not knowing about it. Unimportant, they say. Forgotten, even. Shelled to smithereens during the Revolution. It has its charms, just not this time of year. I'm not a good ambassador. I've only been here once before, as a teenager. This place used to be a province, a workers' resort before the city swallowed it and the artillery did its work. The reeds are the real star of the show. It's not really a sea, it's the Bay of Revachol. And the bay feeds into the ocean. Yes, we're on an island in an ocean, the world's largest body of water.
Known to the early Revacholians as Les Immensités Bleues, the blue, vast, lukewarm and unknowable.
Caillou, as you already know. Imagine a pebble. A smoothed-over pebble amidst a great blue sea, misshapen, cracked. The cracks are the river Esperance.
It is clear this pebble is of enormous value to her and to humanity at large.
I would be happy to. We're in Martinez. Martinez is... You would... I'm not a good... This place used to be a province. Revachol. The great kind.
As if it's self-explanatory. Beyond patriotism.
History detective. They built this city to resolve history. Our part in it, at least. Our centuries. They say it's where the terrible questions of our time will be answered. By that I mean... conflicts. ideological conflicts. We are standing on a fertile, self-sufficient island able to sustain up to 200 million people in the middle of the Insulindic Ocean, the world's connective tissue. It's where the money is. Oh, we're quite a way off. About 22 kilometers from the center of the world. That soldering iron is the Bank of the World building. The bottom floors are Insiacom. Coalition government in
Silence. She lowers her hand. The water, the light. It's as though you're seeing it for the first time.
We are where we are. I have no truer answer to give, unfortunately.
This is one thought you need to complete. Where are you?
Was there something else you wanted to know? I remember something about a lowdown.
This has been informative. Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure my memory-impaired partner has many more questions to ask. Might I suggest not asking them all right now? Messier will be here later too, and tomorrow...
Absolutely. My commitment here is long-term.
It's better not to eat all your candy at once.
Indeed. I'm always at your service. These are unimportant times, Detective. You and I were born after the dust had settled. 1,000th of a second for the big time. The revolution. It's quite easy. Every 100 years or so, our species gets together to decide what's next, who gets shot in the head, and who gets the mineral rights. It's a real kerfuffle. Why, of course. We're talking Duke Out Central. Full swing, interest... No. I would say the apes were neutral. On the other hand, those would be the communists. Generally speaking, 40 million people got shot in the head during the World Revolution. Oh, and the anarchists too. They shot them well. So well, did they ever? Before they got shot themselves, they shot 2 million people.
Yeah, it was a kerfuffle, all right.
Yes, the Insulindian deluge, they call it. Oh, lots of people. Even the king got shot in the head, or thrown beneath a horse, or drowned. Accounts differ. It was the real king abdicated and lived out a long and productive life as a venture capitalist in Grad. Yes, King Guillaume had a nose for bad PR. He ran before it. What is the expression? Went down? Anyway, Gil got him and tens of thousands of his wonderfully fascist kingsmen. It was the liberals got the mineral rights. And by mineral rights, I mean everything. Liberals are usually middle-class people, Detective. Or the remaining gentry. The benefit... Some were rich enough to stay with the Constitution, with monarchy. Big mistake. Others bet on the revolution. They were called the Ultras, or Ultra-Liberals. They fared well. They didn't win so much as survive. We were the last ones standing when the war ended.
We? She's one of them. Of course.
To foreign intervention. The Coalition. Those people really took the mineral rights. The Liberals took everything that wasn't nailed to the ground. The Coalition took the ground. The ocean, the law, the coalition of nations. Grad, Mesk, Vesper, Messina, Oranje, and Sur-le-Clay, the armed center of the world. They landed here and ended the revolution. It was the moralists believe in keeping everything exactly the way it is. They believe in mineral rights, and at least not in the same manner and volume as the others do. They are the long-standing provisional rulers of Revachol now, the coalition government. This is their zone of control. They embolden the RCM with crumbs of the same law they took. Technically speaking, you are a moralist.
The color of moralism is blue. The official motto of Moral Intern, or Moralist International, is a blue forget-me-not, a piece of grey sky. Unofficial. For a moment, there was hope.
Of course. Not easy to be moderate about head shooting in your line of work. The turn of the century revolution? Don't answer it. It's a trick question. The revolution began in '02 on the Isla of Grad, though by the end nearly the whole world had gotten involved. It wasn't a who, but a what. A pandemic of Zarat, a particularly virulent prion disease, which the authorities in Grad proved unable to contain. It made people overthrow their governments. Indeed, Zarat is a highly infectious microorganism that destroyed brain tissue.
It was a funny time in history. They discovered transistors and rock music, but they didn't know anything about
From Revachol and Grad? Not far. The world managed to cauterize itself. Mazov's government was overthrown in '08, and the coalition... Why? You and I, officer. Our lives in the...
Something tells you her life and yours are not that similar. Maybe it's because she has a boat, and you have that...
No doubt. But we share the same time and position on the planet's crust. That counts for more than you think. Modernity. They developed the marvels of the inter-estuary communication. Telematic milieus, radiation, colored plastics. Meanwhile, in Revachol West, the after...
51 minus 8 equals 43.
Time flies. The 20s saw a decade of urban war, west of the river leveled, offshore platforms in flames. Still, it's regarded as an improvement on what came before. '08 to '19 was simply hell. The 30s? Things settled down in the 30s. Revachol East transformed itself into the world's largest tax haven, with the international community's blessing. For the first time in a... Yes, and quantitative easing. It was a market mirage, unfortunately. The 40s dispelled it. An Isla-wide hangover, you might say. So, welcome to reality, baby.
For her to be where she is, Wild Pines Group must have picked the right side.
They picked the winning side. That's why they're here, and others are not. Perhaps it wouldn't have turned out that way had I been in charge. I might have bet on the king and I would have sided with the cannons. If you'd seen the calibers of the things, you might have too. 10 of the 14 Indo tribes got it wrong. Feld, Kupri, Tricentennial. So I suppose I would have been in good company. Good question. What would you have done differently? Then you would have died, most likely. Not far from here. Maybe even right here, during the beachhead, defending the coast the day the Coalition took the city. No, almost certainly. The Commune would have forced you. Such was the fate of the undecided. Good question. What would you have done? So a quarter of humanity simply lost their minds. And how would you stop a prion? A complex folding protein, unlife, with a technology 50 years ago. Good hygiene. Really. A very mod. When they failed to step up, Marzov and his party stepped in. In this particular case, maybe a more
Opinions expressed here do not reflect.
And what is your official?
My position, ma'am? My parents got ripped to shreds in the revolution. I would have gone the same way.
Understandable. Good question. I see. A tenth of humanity. The key of history is in the lock. Keep turning at any cost. Past. That's what De Briever, the leader of the Communards, said before she got a capital is finished. But understand this.
Opinions expressed here.
And what is
My position, ma'am?
Understandable. Good question. You and everyone else. But that's got nothing to do with preventing the revolution. Good question. What would you have done differently? And I asked you, past-less detective of the Citizens' Militia, what insight has acute encephalopathy given to you? Then you would have died, most likely. Then you would have died fighting against them. Long before the beachhead. They are what they are. Anyway, enough sentimental.
Not so fast. Who is she in all this? Ask her who she is. She owes you an answer. She won't maneuver her way out of this one.
I am the vilest of the vile. A traitor. I am an ultra.
She raises the corner of her mouth, smirking, revealing a canine.
Yes. I am the nether creature of the Forbidden Swamp. I pushed the king under a shit wagon and betrayed the revolution. My kind, I can see you thought we'd gone extinct. After all, no sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight.
In her green eyes you see a mixture of truth and self-satire. Decades of guilt and pride.
A fitting punishment, to be forgotten, if not forgiven. Save a prayer for us. When the dust settled, the Liberals were the only ones left to clean up the mess. By virtue of their survival, they were handed enormous power to shape the future. With due respect to our overlords, the eternal caretaker government that keeps Martinaise, I would not have relinquished sovereignty to the Coalition. Not here in Martinaise, and not just...
She realizes her small, cold fists are clenched. She loosens.
Then for my daughters. We had an obligation to defend our sovereignty. We should have burned the whole Isla.
Dark orange flames reflect in her green eyes. An oil fire on the ocean.
Perhaps. My intellectual...
You're no dummy yourself.
A smart boy getting smarter. On basic term of reality. Yes. I suppose I am.
Seditious talk, man.
Yes. Whatever else I am. I'm also a mother. And a wife. Now, shall we return to reality? A bird? A sphenicid? A flightless bird of the polar regions? Ah! This is the pier of Rue de Saint-Ghislaine, 33A, where the tenants have been... or two. A pre-revolutionary tenement. Old buildings are called tenements, you see. And new buildings, bâtiments. After les bâtiments nouveaux. But 33A and 33B are not nouveaux. This one used to be 8 to 10 stories tall. A real high-rise by the standards of the last century. Built to mirror the skyscrapers across the bay in the Delta. That was before the war, of course. Mostly the urban middle class, I believe. This was once primo real estate, before the cannons lopped 4 or 5 stories off. Splat, splat. Wonderful. We're in Martinez, baby. A casual term of endearment popular among the 50-plus crowd.
She refers to your corresponding ages.
Martinez is a district of Revachol. A very small... You would be excused for not knowing about it. Unimportant, they say. Revachol, the great...
As if it's
history detective. They built this city, the nations of the Occident, or migrant workers from Semin in the DeLorean century. They say it's... By that I mean, we are standing on a fertile, self-sufficient island, able... Speak for yourself, officer. I'm well known in certain parts. 22 kilometers from the...
Silence. The water. She observes your eyes, scanning. This is one thought you need to
Was there something else you wanted to know? I remember something about a lowdown. The girl in the old lady rags. Looks like a sullen and rebellious member of... Yes, you and I belong to the supraculture. We're common, the herd. The music on the radio, the food in the chain restaurant. She prefers a fantasy world, an infraculture with its own dress code and vernacular. It is an illusion, I'm afraid. There is no refuge from the supraculture. Young people who dye their hair funny colors and wear old people's clothes are stupid. And their little All right. What next?
Suddenly, you're not so sure you're part of the supraculture.
And what would that be?
She lets out an unrestrained laugh.
My reality-impaired colleague is not so far off. Many of the RCM's fashions, even weapon preferences, borrow heavily from classic Vespertine cop shows. My precinct alone has 3 officers who go by the name Ace. But please, do continue this reality exploration.
Yes, let's. Glad to have been of assistance. The little that I know. Anything? Of course, detective.
We should think about calling it a day, maybe. The nights are still miserably cold this time of year. You certainly have been avoiding it.
A sturdy metal door guards the southwest entrance to
Look at me when I'm talking to you.
Hello again, officer. How are things? I'm a Nighthawk.
Odd. There's a little meanness in that smile.
Yes?
The theme on that pinball machine is a standard royalist theme, used clinging to a picture book version of the past century, waiting for the king to come back and cast out all the profiteers and homosexuals. Basically, imagine a yellow plastic crown with a liquor brand emblazoned on it. The sentiment is called anti-centennial nostalgia, pining for a time before the turn of the century. The worker is in a deep slumber. You see a heavy steel door with a prominent dimpled lock. You immediately feel drawn to the color. Blue is for mystery.
You do? It's a door in the back of the kitchen. Why do you care where it leads? Yes. I suppose it's worth seeing if we can get in. Just to be thorough. As a side investigation. Garth is the person to ask about this. The cafeteria manager.
The cobalt blue surface feels rough to touch. It leads to a side building, adjacent to this one. The old building next to this. The door does not budge.
Hello again, sweetie. Oh, sweetie, I heard your conversation with the manager about your financial troubles. When do you get your next paycheck?
You must be joking. Although our...
It's not easy to assert your right to a decent living wage when you don't have a strong union behind.
Interesting idea. This Everard sounds powerful. Maybe you could try to force a tear out of your duct. Really rip into the whole emotional aggression thing.
Officer, get a hold of yourself, please.
Sweetie, I'm sorry, but I think you need more help than I can give you. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I don't...
We should think about calling it a day. You certainly have been avoiding it.